One of the most important relationships in Connecticut politics is between a mayor or first selectman and their state representatives. These relationships are crucial for both the representative and local leader, as information is shared from the municipality to the state and vice versa. In rare cases, they end up being the same person. Norm Needleman is one such person, a state senator and the First Selectman of Essex. He joins us today to talk about bills and projects on the local and state level. We'd like to thank our new premier sponsor at Digital Back Office, Palo Alto Networks. Check them out at digitalbackoffice.com or paloaltonetworks.com, as well as their sponsors at Gateway and Housatonic Community Colleges. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments below. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders. Senator Needleman, thanks for joining us today.
Great, and thanks for having me here.
Excellent. So in addition to being the senator for the 33rd District, you are also the First Selectman of Essex. And the 33rd District includes Essex, as well as Portland, East Hampton, Colchester, Haddam, East Haddam, Chester, Deep River, Lyme, Clinton, Westbrook, and parts of Old Saybrook. So I guess the first question would be, why take on both roles?
Well, I got involved in municipal government, like so many people, serving on a couple of boards and commissions. And then in 2003, a friend of mine ran for First Selectman, Phil Miller. He did it for 4 terms, and I was elected with him each time. And when he moved on to the legislature, I became First Selectman, and I've been that now since 2011. And I love the First Selectman job. I've sort of changed how the town operates to more of a management job than directly hands-on. Plus, I'm a workaholic, and I like to try to give back. So I've been doing both for a while, and I hope to continue to be able to do both.
Excellent. And so I guess, what are some of the benefits of your kind of unique position? If there's an issue in town, do you say to your constituents, I know a guy in the Senate, or, how does that work?
Well, the interesting thing is, it's not only that I do those 2 things, it's that I started and built a business that I've operated for 40 plus years now, and which my sons largely manage, but I bring a unique perspective to each of the jobs that I do. So when I ran for First Selectman, I brought the perspective of being a business person. Don't necessarily think that all business people are necessarily good at public life, but I think it's great if you have somebody who knows business, who is good at public life, and who can translate some of the talents necessary to run in a more open and transparent way that requires more consensus building. So I made that transition, and then bringing both of those skills to the legislature is really unique, I think. And so I sit in this building, the Capitol. I sit here as a state senator representing all the towns you mentioned, but on one shoulder is being a First Selectman, and on the other shoulder is being a business person. When I'm in town hall, that's my primary job, and I wear the business person on the shoulder and the state senate job on the other shoulder. I can't say that using people knowing that I'm a state senator, that I call when I have issues, probably gets them to react a little bit more. I'd like to think I could convince them to react appropriately if I was just a First Selectman.
Yeah. But some of your surrounding First Selectmen in kind of equally sized towns might not get that call back quite as quick as you as a senator.
I've always been fairly persuasive as a First Selectman, but I can't tell you for sure. I don't have metrics to measure that against.
It certainly doesn't hurt.
No.
So in the Senate, you are the chair of the Energy and Technology Committee, which means you are wrapped up in the response to Tropical Storm Isaias and kind of all the fallout from that. And you've sponsored a bill, which we'll get to in a moment, but what was your initial reaction to the Eversource kind of handling of the outages?
Well, so the backstory behind why I'm chair of the Energy Committee is interesting. After I got elected to the Senate, I talked to Senator Looney, who's the president of the Senate, and he was sort of trying to suss out what I was interested in and, what my strengths were, being a business person, being a municipal official. But we did talk about some of the issues I had over the years that I've been in office as a first selectman with regard to Eversource and where I think that they could use some improvement. And he said, well, that sounds perfect. Why don't you chair the Energy Committee?
Yeah.
And I did not know what that meant in the moment, but now that I know it, I'm not so sure I should have ever mentioned that. It's an incredibly complicated, committee to chair. Because
it's not the fluff easy course you take to just.
There are none that are easy, but this one requires a tremendous amount of. It's an enormous learning curve, especially for a freshman walking in, really not being an expert in energy policy, because this is about grid level energy policy, not just storm response. So I chair it, and this is the first major storm where I have been both selectman and Senate chair. And prior to the storm, we had the rate increase that hit those bills in August, and I think it was July actually. And people reacted very poorly to that. And so this bill is an attempt. The bill that we're bringing out is an attempt to do both, deal with storm response and with rates.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess you mentioned the rates, because Connecticut currently has some of the highest energy costs in the nation. And, for a small state, a lot of people are probably feeling like they're not getting, kind of the bang for their buck. What do you see as kind of the cause of that situation?
Well, I'm perfectly willing to blame whoever's at fault, or at least try to learn why we are where we are.
Yeah.
There have been things that I've learned in this process of getting up to speed to chair the Energy Committee, that it's not only the rates. Connecticut does have some of the highest rates in the country, but we also have some of the most advanced energy efficiency programs. And with the energy efficiency programs comes a sort of a mitigation of some of those higher rates. The higher rates are a function. Certainly, there's room for improvement in how the utilities are regulated and how they build their rates. But we live in a very heavily wooded state.
There's always going to be trees. Yeah.
There's lots of trees, and also we're very committed to carbon reduction goals that require more renewables, more carbon-free energy generation. And that does come with a cost. So if we don't find a way to mitigate that through efficiency and through programs, especially that benefit poor and working class families, we're not doing our job totally. And one of the things that I'm really committed to is anything we do with regard to more renewables, we have to mitigate it for poor and working class families. We cannot do this on the back of the poor people in the state of Connecticut and the working families here. So it's complicated. How we got here could probably take, years for me to learn and years to discuss, but we are where we are, and I'm looking forward. We're trying to do things the right way for the ratepayers of Connecticut.
You sponsored a bipartisan bill on this with state senators Paul Formica, David Arconti, and Charlie Ferraro. Can you tell us a little bit about the specifics of that bill and how they might help consumers?
I mean, the current bill that we're talking about.
Yeah, the one you sponsored.
Yeah. Well, so just so you know, all four energy bills that we brought out in the 2019 session were done in a bipartisan way.
Oh, great.
Senator Formica and I were both, Senator Formica was the first selectman for a long time. And we're friends. On top of that, we have been from before we both became elected. So we've been committed to working closely and doing everything we can to come up with consensus bills. So this bill that we're working on will move the state to what are called performance-based standards, which is one of our requirements. What we think that it will work better for all parties, including the utilities, so that they know what their targets really are. And that's like a major part of it. We also want to focus on restitution for food and medicine when the outage is of a certain length. We also want to look at bill credits for, per diem bill credits when power is out, so people are not, it's kind of an incentive to the utilities, but it's also a benefit to the consumers. So we have a bunch of stuff in there. We've tried to really keep the focus on the things that are important. Honestly, we're negotiating whether or not we can add in some extension of the solar programs because those are about to expire. We would have done that had we been in a regular session, but they are kind of off the topic of the bill a little, and I've been fairly adamant that we keep our scope narrow. But this one, I think, is a jobs bill. It's good for all the towns, and those are the important things for me.
Kind of related, CCM has weighed in on the situation, saying that the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, or PURA, was a little slow to penalize Connecticut Light Power and now Eversource after Tropical Storm Irene in 2011. Should there be more oversight on how PURA oversees kind of these penalties?
Yeah, well, that's the other part of the bill, really strengthening PURA's hand to give them more oversight, more immediate oversight, more time to review rate cases, all the things that we've worked closely with PURA on to try to give them the ability to do a better job, because I think that we have a new chairperson, and she's absolutely terrific. And I have great hopes for her helping improve the regulatory climate in the state and make all of the regulated utilities more accountable.
Kind of looking to the future, that committee is called the Energy and Technology Committee. What do you see as the future of energy in Connecticut? Can we at some point be the Saudi Arabia of wind power, as the Governor Lamont once put it? What is the new tech in this area that Connecticut is kind of looking to in the future?
Well, when you talk, the committee has never really been focused on the technology side. It's always been energy-related technology. So I think things like data centers and improving access to higher speed internet are all things that we need to be focused on. How do we become more technology focused in general as a committee? But also when it comes to energy itself, we do have a great opportunity to be a launch point for a huge amount of wind energy. We have 2 deep water piers in Bridgeport and New London that have no bridges. So they're a perfect access point to the offshore ground for wind energy. And Governor's committed state bonding money to improve the pier in New London. There are bids out that have been accepted that are basically going to utilize the Bridgeport area. So I think we can have thousands of new jobs in the state that are good paying, middle income jobs that are related to renewable energy. I also think that grid scale solar is something that we have a great opportunity to do here, using some brownfields and other areas in some of the poorer cities, but also in the rural areas. As long as the towns that have them benefit from them, I think it's a great thing to do. Residential solar is also important because it tells everybody that we're serious. Obviously, it doesn't have a grid scale impact unless there's a lot of it. So I think it's important as a marketing tool and as something to say to the world, we have a commitment to this. So I think we need to do more on that front also.
Excellent. You mentioned the deep water piers in New London and Bridgeport. So that's some infrastructure stuff that you need in order to do the offshore stuff that we kind of already have in place?
Well, they are, the state's committed 125 million or 140 million, and the partnership with Eversource and Ørsted has committed additional money to build out the New London Pier. There's still some final details that need to be worked on, with New London, and I'm hoping that gets resolved soon. But yeah, I think that the state is well on its way to that piece of it. It's going to take a few years before we start launching it, and we have probably 1,000 megawatts of wind energy already procured at a certain price, that we need to build out the capacity to launch it now.
Excellent.
And we authorized last year 2,000 megawatts of wind energy, hopefully to be deployed by 2030, that will all be launched out of Connecticut.
Mm-hmm. You said 2,000 megawatts. What kind of scale is that? Like, how many megawatts is Connecticut? Is that a large percentage of our needs? Would that be kind of a drop in the bucket? Where does that put us?
That replaces the capacity of Millstone, although Millstone is baseload power, which means, I mean, that's the thing about renewables that people need to always be mindful of. The problems in California speak incredibly loudly to that. Baseload power is power that you flip the switch and it runs 24/7, 365. Wind energy runs when the wind is blowing. Solar runs, generates energy when the sun is shining. So the missing link for renewables up to now has been battery storage. Some way to harness the excess energy you produce during the times that it's being generated so that it's able to supplement that capacity when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, so to speak. So we were going to work on a large procurement for battery storage this year had we been in a regular session. But Connecticut, I think, uses 5,000 megawatts a day on average. So it was 40% of our capacity, which is about what Millstone is. But understand, again, this is too complicated to even think about. The capacity market for energy is not state by state. Right? We are part of an organization called ISO New England. It's a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission entity that provides grid scale reliability to New England. So we are, all the generation that occurs in Connecticut, even though it's based in Connecticut, is for the New England grid, which complicates things. But when we do it, we pay for it. So we also need to consider renegotiating our relationship with ISO, or at least make ISO more responsive to our goals and desires.
So it sounds like it's kind of bigger scale than the homeowners solar, where if they're not just powering their house, they're feeding into a grid and they're getting credited if they're putting in more than they're taking, that sort of thing, but on a bigger state level. On a more local level, the Sustainable Essex Committee this past month approved a plan to install an electric vehicle charging station. And it looks like you were successful in raising the funds. How important is the local infrastructure in some of these sustainability initiatives?
Well, when Phil Miller was first selectman, he formed the Clean Energy Committee, and it was a very dedicated group of volunteers who worked hard to review every municipal building to make sure that they were as low energy consumption, as energy efficient as possible. So we zoned things, we added thermostats, we put in new systems where we could afford them. Over time, they did everything because we don't have that many buildings in Essex. So they achieved a lot of their goals. At one point, we decided to do a solarize Essex project. They championed that. So we got a large number of homeowners to do residential solar. They picked the vendor that they thought was reputable, and those guys did a lot of work. Then I was at a council of government meeting where there was a group called Sustainable Connecticut making a presentation. And it just sort of struck me, the Clean Energy Committee, had done pretty much everything we asked of them. So we've now sort of morphed them into being Sustainable Essex. And they're working on a bunch of things. Waste reduction is one of them that I know is a pet project of theirs. Another is the charging station in Essex. So the charging station, we approved it at the Board of Selectmen as far as the location, but we were pretty clear that we did not want to pay any of the capital costs. Essex really rarely spends money on anything. And that's how we keep our mill rate so low. But we have great volunteers, and they match the money that comes from Sustainable Connecticut, and I believe that will be installed soon. So,
Excellent. Well, that's some positive news.
yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more of a downer, a little bit of sad news. Essex recently, the Essex steam train and North Pole Express with Santa Special Elf, those events were postponed for Christmas 2020 in response to COVID-19 pandemic. And it kind of speaks to the various ways that the virus has affected, our year from the big to the small. What has the impact been in Essex and other towns in your district, many of which are also popular tourist destinations?
Right. So it's quite personal to me because my other half runs the theater in town, and she's been closed, since March. The entire season has been canceled.
Is that the Norma Terrace? Is that what that is?
No, that's the Ivoryton Playhouse.
Ivoryton Playhouse.
And well, of course, the Goodspeed and the Norma Terrace are also closed up in Chester and East Haddam. So when it comes to entertainment, tourism, all of those things, we've struggled a lot. It's causing a lot of people to rethink their careers, which is sad. We're close to people who perform all over the country, and a lot of them are going into other jobs now because they don't know when they're going to go back to live theater. With the steam train, it's particularly disappointing. We were able to negotiate with the ECD so they could open safely for their, sort of the latter part of their summer season, and they have been operating the train and the boat very, very safely. But when it comes to the train, I'm friends with the ownership at the railroad. Obviously, it's a small community, and tens of thousands of kids go on that train every year. I've been bringing the grandkids, for 5 years now, and it's just sad. The railroad, like all the other arts organizations, really need help to survive, because we do want to have a tourism, arts and entertainment, business at the end of all this, although it will be different. But we have to do something. The state has to do something. The federal government has to do something to help.
Yeah. Have you in the Senate had any discussions with some of your fellow senators about what could be done to help the entertainment industry?
Well, remember, we're not in session at this point, so we really can't do anything. It's in the moment, it's up to the federal government and federal programs, as well as the governor, to come up with a plan to make sure that all of this stays, that there's something to return to. And it's a struggle. I will tell you, it's not the governor's fault. It's just that it's quite a struggle, and it will not be easy to get to the other side of this whole, pandemic. So,
speaking of getting to the other side, do you see in the future? Do you see the other side in the horizon? Do you think we will get back to normal at some point, or is some of the changes going on now permanent?
I think human beings are very adaptable. We will adapt, and we will get through it, and we will get through it stronger as a people. But we will not get through it without a lot of dislocation. When you think about the shift to people working at home, there's probably 10, 15, 20 years worth of evolutionary change happening in a matter of months. Same thing is true with retail. There's a rapid evolution in retail that's happening. There's also a huge evolution in AI that has been accelerated to minimize people and maximize machinery. So will we get through it? Yeah, we will. But we will have a lot of dislocation. And honestly, that's where I think that being, it's a unique time to be an elected public official, because all eyes need to be on how to get through it and mitigate the impact on people. We're already gonna, we already had a lot of income disparity in the country, and this can make it significantly worse, whether it's education or economics. All the people that work at the casino, for example, and in the hospitality industry are facing a new normal. And it's not a matter of just finding a vaccine and start injecting people. It's a psychological thing when would you feel comfortable being shoulder to shoulder with people again?
Yeah.
When you're your age, it may be at one point. When you're my age, it may be at a different point. So, but I worry about the inequity in all of this, that if you have a lot of money and you live in a very comfortable town, living a very comfortable life, you'll have an easier time finding the new normal than people who live, in the poorer rural parts of the state or the poorer urban parts of the state. It's going to be very difficult. And, that's where the rubber meets the road for those of us in government. We have a task here. We have a role, and it's important. So we need to do something.
Speaking, I guess, specifically to your role, what do you see the future holding for Essex? What are your priorities as a municipal leader going into 2021? And also, what are your priorities as a state senator, and where do they intersect?
Well, as a First Selectman, my priorities are continue to do the work that we do, because Essex, I think we've moved to the point where we're trying to keep ahead of the curve on things like roads and sidewalks and the services that we deliver. Mm-hmm. For a whole bunch of reasons, Essex doesn't deliver a tremendous amount of services. We're a small town, but town's beautiful. It's well maintained. We have plans, 3-5 years out for capital improvements. I want to keep executing against that. The big risk is, what does this pandemic do to long-term tax collections? Yeah. We're so dependent on property tax to survive. And that's kind of where it intersects with my state role. How do we deal with the over-reliance on property tax? Cover so many costs, especially educational costs. I think that and some of the rules around planning and zoning are important. One of my big items, we'll be dealing with it tomorrow night on Wednesday night on the agenda of the Board of Selectmen meeting, is have a public hearing on combining planning and zoning in the interest of being more efficient and finding a way to operate the town government better. We're going to do that. But I asked to be on the planning and development committee in the legislature. So I'm vice chair of planning and development, which brings my experience as a first selectman to bear on that committee. And I think that part of my agenda is to make sure all the rules are in place so we have an equitable and fair state where people have an opportunity to live anywhere they want, and that we have common sense rules that allow the things that we need, at the town level to not be impeded by the state. It's a common refrain at our COG meetings. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. Everybody's wary about the damage that the state can do. Yeah. I'm not a fan of mandatory regionalization. I think that's a bugaboo in so many ways that could make matters worse. And until somebody shows me a cost benefit to that, I'm not going to support it. But where we could operate more efficiently and where some of the state regulations that impede collaboration can be taken out of our way, like on education, we should be able to do that. So those are all things that I want to work on.
So you don't want to be forced into regionalization, but the state can remove obstacles for towns that do want to work together on some things.
Yeah. So we already work together on a lot of things, but education is a particularly difficult one. So,
excellent. A lot of regulation tied into all that.
Yes, there is.
Excellent. Well, Senator, thanks so much for talking with us today.
That's great. I'm so glad I had an opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to doing it again if you ever need me.
All right. Well, I think Essex and your district are in good hands. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks to our premier sponsors, Digital Back Office Palo Alto Networks, who you can check out at digitalbackoffice.com or paloaltonetworks.com, and Gateway Community College and Housatonic Community College. Learn more at gatewayct.edu and housatonic.edu. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH, 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like. And watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.